Hello everyone, I am Dr. Rupak Bhandari, Assistant Professor in Department of General Practice and Emergency Medicine, BPKIHS. Today we will be discussing on approach to a case of COPD in primary care setting. So this figure depicts clearly how COPD affects the lungs and airways. So to define COPD, it is a common preventable and treatable lung disease. There is airway and alveolar abnormalities, which is caused by the significant exposure to noxious particles or gases, and there is persistent respiratory symptoms and progressive airflow limitation in COPD. So in this slide, we can see that among the top 10 global causes of death, COPD comes at number 3. So we can see the impact of COPD in this slide. It not only causes the mortality, it also increases the morbidity of the patients. It also restricts the patient's physical exertion, household chores, social activities, and ability to work and family activities significantly. So talking about the risk factors of COPD, the age factor, age more than 40 is a common risk factor. Smoking is one of the most common risk factor for COPD. Along with that, the pollution, it may be indoor air pollution or outdoor air pollution. In Nepalese context, the indoor air pollution causes more COPD than outdoor air pollution. So other causes are chronic asthma, which is non-controlled asthma, and alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, chemical exposure, and chronic bronchitis. These are the other risk factors for COPD. Now talking about the spectrum of COPD, chronic bronchitis is a common risk spectrum. Other are emphysema, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, and chronic asthma. Now let's talk about the differentiation of chronic bronchitis and emphysema. So chronic bronchitis is a clinical diagnosis when there is the cough production persistently over 3 months or more for at least 2 consecutive years, then we can label the patient as chronic bronchitis. The patient is overweight and cyanotic with elevated hemoglobin, with peripheral edema and rhonchi or wheezing on the chest. So in asthma, in emphysema, it is a pathological diagnosis where there is a permanent enlargement and destruction of the air spaces distal to the terminal bronchioles. The patient is lean and thin, older than that of chronic bronchitis. There is severe dyspnea and there is quiet chest on auscultation, and X-ray findings are hyper-inflated chest with flattening of the diaphragm. So chronic bronchitis is also called blue blotters and emphysema as pink puffers. So there is increased inflammation and excess mucus production in chronic bronchitis, whereas in emphysema there is alveolar membrane breakdown and causes disruption of the alveoli and air entrapment. So the other spectrum are alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, where there is a lack of alpha-1 antitrypsin, which causes the damage, lung damage by neutrophil elastase, and it also damages the liver along with the lungs. And chronic asthma, when it is not controlled with continued medication, then it may lead to COPD in the long run, where we can find the increased muscle thickness, increased fibrosis, increased mucus production, and there is airway remodeling leading to COPD. Now coming to pathophysiology, in presence of the etiology such as smoking and air pollutants, along with the host factors, it leads to the impaired lung growth, accelerated decline of the lung function, and lung injury with lung and systemic inflammation. And this leads to small airway disorders and abnormalities, and emphysema and systemic effects, which leads to persistent airflow limitation, and it manifests as the symptoms, exacerbations, and comorbidities. So talking about the clinical findings in COPD, the patient is plethoric with erythematous face. The patient may be cyanosed. The patient is cachexic, especially in case of emphysema. The patient is tachypneic. On auscultation, there is distant heart sounds. There is increased antero-posterior diameter of the chest wall. There is expiratory wheeze. Cor-pulmonale is a long-standing feature in which there is the swelling of the limbs with raised jugular venous pressure. And if clubbing is present, we should rule out other causes such as lung carcinoma and bronchiectasis. So on investigation, the chest X-ray is a common investigation where we can find the hyperinflated lungs, flattened diaphragm, and the slender heart. CT scan is not routinely recommended, but to rule out the lung cancer or bronchiectasis. Another investigation is oximetry and arterial blood gas measurement, where you can find the hypercapnia and hypoxia. In hematocrit, we can find polycythemia, and the diagnostic test is spirometry, where we find the non-reversible airway obstruction. So these are the X-ray findings of the case of COPD, where there is retrosternal air spaces, there is increased antero-posterior diameter, we have barrel-shaped chest, we have narrow mediastinum, and there is hyperlucency of the chest and flattening of the diaphragm. So what are the key indicators that diagnose towards COPD? When there is dyspnea that is progressive and persistent, when there is chronic cough which may be dry or productive, when there is chronic sputum production, when the patient has recurrent lower respiratory tract infection, in presence of the history of risk factors such as the host factors, such as genetic factors and congenital or developmental and abnormalities, when the patient has history of tobacco smoking, the smoke from the indoor air pollution, when there are occupational dust or vapors or fumes, gas exposure, and with family history of COPD or the childhood factors such as low birth weight or recurrent childhood respiratory infection, then we can establish the diagnosis of COPD. So talking about now differential diagnosis of COPD, bronchial asthma is common differentials of COPD. So to differentiate COPD from asthma, the spirometry gives the idea. In the post-bronchodilator spirometry, if there is improvement in more than 12 to 15%, then the diagnosis suggests towards asthma. When there is non-improvement after post-bronchodilator therapy, then it is COPD. So another differential is congestive cardiac failure, where we find bilateral crepitus over the lung fields with S3 gallop and raised JVP. It hints towards chronic cardiac failure. Another differential is bronchiectasis, where there is copious amount of sputum production. The diagnosis is by CT scan of the chest. Another differential is tuberculosis, in which we find the cavitation in the lung, and the diagnosis is by the sputum examination, finding the acid-fast bacilli. And another differential is carcinoma of the lung, which can be diagnosed with CT scan chest and bronchoscopy. Now coming to the assessment of COPD, we should assess the symptoms, degree of airflow limitation, risk of exacerbations, and comorbidities. Now let's start with the assessment of symptoms. There are different scales for dyspnea. In COPD, the commonly used are Modified Medical Research Council scale for dyspnea. It ranges from grade 0 to 4. Grade 0 is no dyspnea, where the patient is not troubled by breathlessness with strenuous exercise. In grade 1, there is slight dyspnea. The patient is troubled by walking uphill or hurrying on a level ground. In grade 2, there is moderate dyspnea. The patient walks slower than the normal based on the age, or the patient has to stop for breath while walking on the level surface. And in grade 3, the patient has severe dyspnea, in which the patient stops for breath after walking around 100 yards. And in grade 4, the patient is very severe dyspneic, where the patient is too breathless to leave the house or while dressing or undressing. So in this category, grade 2 or more is severe symptoms, whereas grade 0 and 1 are less symptoms. So another assessment tool for dyspnea is COPD assessment tool, shortly known as CAT. So here the score ranges from 0 to 40. There are 8 questionnaires in the Likert scale of 0 to 5 on each questionnaire, and the score of 10 or more signifies increase in symptoms. So in this picture we can find the spirometry. The patient is asked to take a deep breath and blow on the tube as fast and as hard as possible, and it is recorded on the computer as a graph, and this shows the spirometric measurements. So in spirometry, through spirometry we can diagnose COPD as well as classify the severity of COPD. So if a post-bronchodilator FEV1 upon FVC is less than 0.7, it is diagnostic of COPD, and it is mild COPD stage 1 gold if FEV1 is more than or equal to 80% predicted. It is moderate with gold stage 2 if FEV1 falls between 50 to 80% predicted. It is severe gold 3 stage if FEV1 is between 30 to 50% predicted, and it is severe, very severe with stage 4 gold if FEV1 is less than 30% predicted. Now, how to assess the risk of exacerbation in COPD? If the patient has 2 or more exacerbations within the last year, or if a single exacerbation leading to hospitalization, or with the patient's FEV1 less than 50% of the predicted value, these are the indicators of high risk. Now, how assessing the comorbidities of COPD? COPD does not only have effects on the lung, but it has systemic effects also. So let's see in this figure. So COPD leads to systemic inflammation and oxidative stress, which leads to the muscle loss and muscle weakness in muscles, which leads to osteoporosis in bones, which leads to depression. It also leads to angina and ACS. It also one of the factor for diabetes and metabolic syndrome, and it may also cause peptic ulceration. So it has effects on the whole body, not only the lungs. So what are the goals of treatment for COPD? So basically there are 2 goals. One is to reduce symptoms and another is to reduce the risk. For reducing the symptoms, we have to relieve the symptoms, we have to improve the exercise tolerance, and we have to improve the health status of the patient. And for reducing the risk, we have to prevent the disease progression, we have to prevent and treat the exacerbations, and we have to reduce the mortality. So this chart is very important. There is a refined ABCD assessment tool for COPD development. First, when the patient is spirometrically confirmed as COPD with a post-bronchodilator FEV1 upon FVC less than 0.7, then we have to stage the airflow limitation, staging from gold 1 to gold 4, and then we have to assess the symptoms and risk of exacerbations. Accordingly, we classify the patient as group A, B, C, and D. So here in the figure we see that in group A patients have low symptoms and low risk patient. Group B patient have low risk patient but high symptoms patient. Group C has high risk patient but low symptom patient, and group D has high risk patient, high symptoms patient. So we have to treat them according to the groups. In group A, where there is low symptoms and low risk, we can use a bronchodilator on and off. So we have to continue or stop or try alternative class of bronchodilator if after evaluation. And in group B is low risk but high symptoms. So in these cases, we have to give them long-acting beta agonist or long-acting muscarinic antagonist. And if the symptoms are persistent, we can combine both. In group C, there is high-risk patient but low symptom patient. In those, we start with long-acting muscarinic antagonist, and if the exacerbations are frequent, then we should add long-acting beta agonist or inhaled corticosteroids. So in group D, there is high symptoms and high-risk patient. We should start with long-acting muscarinic antagonist plus long-acting beta agonist or long-acting beta agonist with inhaled corticosteroids. And if the exacerbations are frequent or symptoms are persistent, then we should add long-acting muscarinic antagonist, long-acting beta agonist, and inhaled corticosteroids. And further, if the exacerbations are even frequent, then we should consider the roflumilast, which is a phosphodiesterase 4 inhibitor. And if the symptoms are persistent in former smokers, we should consider the macrolide therapy, in which the antibiotic such as azithromycin is given 3 days a week, continued for 6 months to 1 year. So these are the current available pharmacological options for the patients with COPD. In the bronchodilator group, there are short-acting and long-acting. So the short-acting are SABA, which consists of albuterol, levoalbuterol. The other group of drug is anticholinergic, short-acting muscarinic antagonist. The common example is ipratropium, and the combination of both. And in long-acting, we can find anticholinergics such as long-acting muscarinic antagonist such as tiotropium or aclidinium, and the other group is long-acting beta agonist. The examples are salmeterol, formoterol, and the combination of both. And the other group of drug is theophylline. So the another group is anti-inflammatory drug, the combination of inhaled corticosteroids and long-acting beta agonist such as fluticasone and salmeterol, budesonide and formoterol are the common combinations available in the market. The another group of drug is phosphodiesterase 4 inhibitor, roflumilast. So oral steroids such as prednisolone and methylprednisolone are to be used as a short term when there is frequent exacerbations. Now, the self-education and management is one of the important part of COPD management. So we have to ask patient for smoking cessation because it is one of the common risk factor for development of COPD. So avoid the pollutions, may it be indoor air pollution, may it be outdoor air pollution. Prefer warm, dry climate over the cold and damp places, and take adequate rest and avoid the contact with flu or cold, and have optimal diet. So now coming to pulmonary rehabilitation, there is individualized treatment plan for the patients. So the physical activity and exercise tolerance is assessed in COPD, and we have to improve the cardiorespiratory endurance, muscle strength, body flexibility, and respiratory muscle training in pulmonary rehabilitation. Talking about nutrition, we should suggest patient to take complex carbohydrate rather than simple carbohydrate. We should ask patient to take high fiber diet, take a good source of protein, and choose poly or monounsaturated fat, and use vitamin and minerals. Now talking about oxygen therapy, the patient is prescribed for domiciliary oxygen therapy if the patient has PaO2 less than 55 mmHg or SaO2 of less than or equal to 88% with or without hypercapnia confirmed over 3 weeks period twice. And if the PaO2 is between 55 and 60 or SaO2 of 88, then also we can prescribe for domiciliary oxygen therapy in presence of pulmonary hypertension, peripheral edema suggesting cardiac failure, and polycythemia. And to prescribe the oxygen therapy, we should prescribe the low flow 1 to 2 liters of oxygen by nasal prongs for at least 15 hours a day. So the surgical therapy is the last treatment option in which there is lung volume reduction surgery, bulectomy or lung transplantation. So we can see the stepwise management. The first step is self-management and education, smoking cessation, bronchodilator therapy, inhaled steroid, pulmonary rehabilitation, oxygen therapy, and surgery. Now talking about the prevention strategies, smoking cessation is first and the foremost strategy that should be taken for COPD control. So ask the patient on every visit in clinic and advise the patient clearly to quit smoking, assess the willingness of the patient to quit smoking, assist the patient in quitting smoking with proper counseling, and arrange for follow-up visit. So another prevention strategy is vaccination. The commonly prescribed vaccines are influenza vaccine and pneumococcal vaccine. So influenza vaccine is given every year and pneumococcal vaccine every 5 years. So these are the follow-up checklist for the patients in primary care. We should assess for the smoking status and desire to quit. We should look for the adequacy of the symptom control with the symptoms of breathlessness, exercise tolerance, and estimated exacerbation frequency. We should also look for the presence of complications, and we should check for the efficacy of the drug as well as side effect of the drug as well as compliance to the drug. And inhaler technique is one of the important part which should not be missed in every OPD visit. So if the patient has been taking the drug but the technique of taking inhaler is not appropriate, then it is not effective for the patient. So we should teach the patient about inhaler technique on every OPD visit. And we should also look for the need for the pulmonary rehabilitation, need for the long-term oxygen therapy, the patient's nutritional status, and the presence of depression, and the need for social and occupational therapy support. So what are the indicators for hospitalization in the patient? When the patient has severe symptoms such as worsening of the resting dyspnea, high respiratory rate, and decreased oxygen saturation, the patient has confusion or drowsiness, when there is acute respiratory failure, when there is onset of the new physical signs such as cyanosis and peripheral edema, when there is failure to respond to the initial medical management, and when there is presence of serious comorbidities such as heart failure or new arrhythmias, and when there is insufficient home support, then we should hospitalize the patient. So we should look for the correct inhaler technique of the patient in every OPD visit for COPD. So whether the patient is taking DPI or MDI, we should check if the patient has been taking it correctly or not. So to summarize, the diagnosis is via the symptoms, risk factors, and spirometry, and the initial assessment of the symptoms, exacerbation history, smoking status, and comorbidities, and initial management with the smoking cessation, vaccination, lifestyle management, initial pharmacotherapy, and self-management education and management of comorbidities. And in the follow-up visit, we should look for the symptom control, exacerbations, smoking status, exposure to the risk factors, inhaler techniques and adherence to the medications, physical activity and exercise, and self-management skills, and the need for oxygen therapy and management of comorbidities. And we should adjust the pharmacotherapy as well as non-pharmacological therapy accordingly. These are the references. Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind attention.